Am I supposed to do anything particular? Point at it or whatever?
Don't hit it.
Okay, I'll try.
Yeah, you got plenty of coffee now?
Oh, I think so. The cup's empty, but it's got plenty in me. I'm going to get fixed here in just a minute now. Is this thing carrying okay? I've never had anybody tell me to speak up. I've had a lot of them tell me to hold it down, but I've never had very many to say, would you get a little louder? And I hope you don't tonight because my voice is about gone. I'm glad to be here. And it's good to be doing some service in my hometown. Yeah, I like to do that. A lot of folks here that I don't know. A lot I do know, but there's some I don't know. And I'd sure like to meet you before I get out of here. Because I like to be connected to this fellowship. And I don't want to be somebody who just sort of slides in, slides out, because that means nothing's happening. And so anybody that we haven't met, please let me meet you before I get out of here. Excuse me. I'm a member of the Primary Purpose Group over at Southern Pines Meets First Baptist Church. And I've had a home group ever since I've been in AA. That's belonging to me is just about as important as the actions in the program of being committed to a place where I'm responsible for what goes on as much as anybody else. I don't need to wait for a greeter. I'm a greeter. If you come in, I want to do the greeting. And so a home group has been very, very important in my life. It's sort of the stabilizing point to sit up. And so I want to tell you just what we do, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. I was saying about it, I don't know why I had it on my mind, but it's a place in the book when you're getting ready to go into the inventory where it talks about getting down to causes and conditions. You know, a lot of times when we start thinking about causes and conditions, it sounds like you're looking for something to blame it on. But the fact is, it's just reality and causes and conditions. You know, I didn't drink, I liked the first drink I ever took, but I didn't drink just because I liked it. I drank because of what it did for me, not to me, what it did for me. And so I just fell in love with it. You know, I was a guy that, I swear to God, I'm not as bad as Brent. Brent, you know it's January. We don't wear jockey shorts to a meeting in January. Got to be a Yankee. I'm not that bad. I'm just going to loosen my tie up a little bit. But that's, yeah, I was a guy just like most people I've seen. I was born up in, I don't like to admit it, but I was born in the western end of South Carolina, right next to Georgia, and it pure sucked. I didn't like it then. I don't even like to drive through there now. And it's modern now. I still don't want to go there. I got born on a cotton farm. I learned to pick cotton before I learned to walk. And I learned that I didn't want to do that as a profession. And so I've never got close to a cotton field now unless I was lost. Not since then. So didn't like anything about that. Didn't like a great deal of the stuff called about causes and conditions. You know, my mother broke up from my dad before I was even old enough to understand it. I was just a little toddler. And they broke up, and my dad left. And I remembered, it's strange what you remember just as a little child. I was probably 2 or 3 years old. And I remember to this day, my dad was walking out of the yard, and I'm just a child, but I knew he wasn't coming back for some reason. It was just a premonition for a little kid. And I was right. He never came back. And I never saw him again till I was a grown man. And so there was just a heck of a lot of turbulence. My mother, she wasn't man crazy, but she just didn't want to be lonely. And so she married some other guy, not all at once, but it seemed like it. Right after Dad left, she brought a guy in there. And I swear to God, I don't mean to be demean anybody, but he was just a runt. I mean, just a runt of a guy. He wasn't much bigger than me, and I wasn't even 5 years old. And I didn't even know what didn't disliking meant, but I didn't like him. The day he walked in, I thought, my sister was older, so she called the thing Alvin. And I was young enough that I had to call that thing Daddy. And I knew he wasn't my daddy. But I called him, and I swore if I ever got big enough, I'd beat him like a drum. And then I grew up, and I was too big. I couldn't beat him, been like whooping a midget. And there's no victory in that, you know. So I never did get to whoop him. He died. And nicest thing he ever did. He's buried in South Carolina. Served him right. Almost in Georgia. And so it was just sort of a chaotic kind of a deal. Causes and conditions. I think that's what they're talking about in the book. You know, when the where you're standing is shaken, you know, that's causes and conditions. And having that idiot in the house was causes and conditions. I didn't like that dude. Had a resentment before I even knew there was such a thing. And so went through that. Finally, when he died, she married another one. And anyway, that went on. She married I think it was 4 times. And there wasn't a winner in the crowd. I mean, not a one. Thank God. And she almost turned me against marriage. So anyway, he grew up in that cotton mill world and then lived in that stuff, those places where it was just a polite form of slavery, really. It was, those cotton mills, they would hire somebody at a salary of next to nothing and almost give them a house. And it was a tricky giving, I'll tell you that, because the rent of the house was just about as much as you'd get paid, so you couldn't afford to quit. And so just as a child, I knew that. And so I grew up in that thing, and I didn't like it, didn't like anything about it. I started serious drinking when I'd drink a little. My grandfather, when he wasn't farming cotton, he was making whiskey. That was a good business back then. Better than cotton, I'll tell you that. He sold a lot more whiskey than he did cotton. And so I did a little sip in there, but got serious drinking when I was in my teens, when I was 16. I lived up in a little town just west of Charlotte. Up there a while back, it was just a little old cotton mill community. I mean, just a nothing town. And I was talking about up in Charlotte one night, and the guy said, "You won't believe it, man. That's a yuppie haven now." I said, "You got to be kidding. Ain't no yuppie with any sense at all going there." But he was, and he's right. They got a Starbucks in my town that I grew up in and did my drinking in. And so that was a dry county. And so I would go across the river. Across the river had a very magical definition to anybody who lived around. If you said cross the river, you didn't need to name anything because everybody knew where you're going. I walked that bridge over the Catawba River from the dry county to the wet county many, many, many times, and that's where I did my drink. I was pretty high class drunk. The place I really got cultivated into drinking was called Rats, R-A-T-S, Rats, and I never heard anybody say, "Why do you call it Rats?" No, you didn't need to. I mean, if you looked at it, you'd probably come up with the same name. Because it was a place where just about anything could go and survive, except people. And bad place. I wasn't old enough to drink, but nobody cared. If you could reach the bar, have at it. And so that's where I got started. And I just sort of fell in love with that kind of life. It was a lot better than walking around that cotton mill village. And so I was over there. And it was an interesting place. It's a real dump of a place, that Rats. And it was never raided in the history of Rats. Who would raid it? I mean, what for? You put people in jail, it would be a promotion. Anyway, it was just one of those swinging little southern, Brent, you would got to see some of these southern cocktail lounges named Rats. And you go in there at 10 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock in the morning, you see the same thing. People trying to dance to a jukebox, whether it was playing or not. They just danced close to it. And somebody shooting pool on a table, and somebody trying to sleep on it. There people trying to fight in the corner and couldn't even find each other. And folks trying to make out in a booth. I mean, it was just an interesting place for humans to go, and that's where I got introduced to alcohol as a way of life. And It certainly gave me a sort of a comfort zone, but I didn't really like it. I went in the military. I coerced my mother into lying about my age, so I went in the military when I was 16 years old. I was a great soldier, as long as they didn't give me anything to hurt people with. I was on a range. I don't even know if I would have mentioned it, with all the talk about what you do with weapons. But anyway, I think I helped create the movement toward don't give them any. I was on the range, and I only got a little bit confused. The targets were over there, and I was shooting over there. And it was only 180 degrees off. I thought it was pretty good. They didn't. Over here is where the bosses were, where the leaders. And I swear to God, I don't believe I was shooting at them. I just wasn't sure which way I was shooting. They didn't like that, though, and they put me in jail. They put me in jail a lot. So I finally got through with that, went up to they really honored me with, when I got through with my stellar performance, they sent me to Alaska, way back before Alaska was even a state. And I saw why it wasn't a state. It was not a good place to send an innocent young child from down south and stick him in Alaska. My God, man, that's brutal. And I didn't like that. And I solved it like I solved a lot of stuff. I stayed drunker than a billy goat just as much as I could. And finally that ran out, and I got sent out to a beautiful little piece of the world called the Aleutian Islands. And island is a poorly used term to describe that. I mean, there ain't nothing tropical about it. The Aleutian Islands is just a bunch of rocks out in the Bering Sea. They got no purpose for existing. I mean, they're just there. And a seal will get up on one and oink every once in a while. That's it. That's all the signs of life. And my job was to stand on one of those rocks with a gun. I don't know who I'm supposed to shoot. The seal or what? I'm not going to shoot a seal, for God's sake. And anyway, that's where it was. Didn't make any sense to me then. Doesn't make any sense now. And that's where I developed alcoholism. Now, seals had nothing to do with it, and I don't think those rocks had anything to do with it. I'd have done it anywhere I was. But there's a place, best definition I've ever heard of alcoholism is in the 3rd chapter of the book, more about alcoholism, about halfway down. It's got some words in there that absolutely ring true with me. It says, we alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control their drinking. That's exactly what happened to me. I think I was about 18 years old, and something happened. I no bell went off or anything. I didn't feel any different, but all at once, from that point to the point of my last drink, I was never able to take a drink and predict what I would do. And so my life just from that point on became a bizarre chain of circumstances and unbelievable situations that'll often happen to wild and crazy drunks like me. Wake up in somebody's house and don't even know who it is. And wouldn't bother to try to find out, because a lot of times to find out, you ain't supposed to be there. I woke up in a town one time in a full-dress military uniform, which was very unusual for me. And I'm sitting in a kitchen in somebody's house. And I knew there were signs of life in there because I could hear it, but I didn't want to make any noise myself because I didn't want anybody to come in there and say, what are you doing here? And the only thing I could say would be, where? Because I don't know where I am, for God's sake. That's the hell of blackouts, And that was the story of my life. When I started drinking, I wouldn't stop till I got stopped. I went to jail a lot, not because I was a hardened criminal. I was a hardened alcoholic. I was a guy, when I drank, I did stupid stuff. And nobody ever got me for a crime or some hideous crime. People got me for just, if you pass out on the floor of a decent place, people don't like that. I mean, that disturbs people who are trying to have a nice drink. And don't believe it, Chuck. Don't believe it, Chuck. But it's all right if you fall out on a nice carpet, but if you throw up on it, people get really testy about that. I mean, they don't like that much. And so I got locked up a lot of times just for being in the way. I had a policeman one time. I wasn't a bad guy that was, was ripping off things habitually. But I had a policeman one time told me, he said, I'd rather arrest anybody I know other than you. I said, why? I'm just kind of hurt my feelings. So why? He said,
Just a second.
yeah.
If anybody's driving a silver Toyota, you're parked in the middle of the road, and they're gonna tow you. So whoever that is, you need to move it. All right, go back.
Where was it? What?
Last I heard, you were woke up in somebody's kitchen.
And I got out. Yeah. But the other one was when that guy said the reason that he hated to arrest me. He said, "You were the slickest guy I've ever seen. I'm not smart, slick." He said it was like trying to pick up a ferret. He said, because you just slide out. It'd take two people to load you in the car because you get slippery. I don't know how I did that, but anyway, I didn't bother to research it either. But anyway, that was what it was. I wasn't somebody that was a malicious, ill-intended guy. I was just an alcoholic who, when I started drinking, it was totally unpredictable to me or anybody else what I would do. And so that just took off, and it kept on. Stayed in the military till they got sick of me. And when I was in the Aleutians, I think they sort of made the decision, they meaning the brass of the military, I think they made the decision that they'd gone about as far as they could with me. Now, you used to guys in a place like the Aleutian Islands, they gave free booze because folks had a tendency to go crazy out there on those islands, on those rocks. And I was one of them, I guess. So anyway, they started putting a whammy on me. And so I got shipped back to the States, went into a fort, and it was pretty, even to me, it became pretty clear that they were in the process of trying to separate me from the U.S. Army. And I could tell that, brilliant alcoholic mind. And on the night of December 26th of, I think it was 1951 or something, anyway, long time ago. But I know it was just the day before Christmas. They told me, I didn't, otherwise I wouldn't have known. I woke up on the floor of the city jail in Junction City, Kansas. And I was passed out on the floor of that jail, uncomfortably close to the men's room. And that is not a very, well, anyway, I won't go into a lot of stuff. I'm drinking coffee, so I won't go into a whole lot of vivid description. Anyway, that is not exactly the kind of place you want to come to. And when I came to, and just after I got conscious, 4 sharp young MP, military police guys, came in, sharp-looking guys. And so they came in, and they're there to pick me up. Now, I didn't normally get escort service back to the base, so I knew something was up. So they loaded me up and I went in, and I went before a board of officers, and they were, unfortunately, we got a base right next to us, so most everybody here knows. Today, thank God, we have good resources for our military people. Back then, that was just about the time AA emerged. The time I'm talking about was just about the time AA was bubbling to the surface. Never mind treatment or recapturing people that have fallen off the deep end. But today, thank God, we do have resources for our military folk, and try our best to get them around. But back then, they didn't have that. It wasn't that they didn't want to help. It's just they weren't equipped to help. And so I went in. There were 4 officers sitting there, very starched guys and good people, well-intended people. And so I went in, and they just did a little casual chatter for a minute. Then they said, whatever they call me, my rank was E-1. E1 is as low as you can go. And they had made an exception and let me be E-. My next promotion would have put me at the bottom. Didn't have to worry about it, I didn't get it anyway. But anyway, whatever they called me and said, we have said ever since you've been in the military, your record shows people always saw you as somebody with a lot of capability. You always looked like a guy with a lot of ability but you never did seem to show that. And said, we've done everything we can do, and we're going to have to let you go. And well, I knew what that meant. I mean, I wasn't a total rookie. And they handed me a piece of paper and read it to me, and then handed me a piece of paper, had my name on there, and said, undesirable discharge, unfit for military service - alcoholism. And I'm 20 years old. Yeah. And the military then literally had no recourse for a guy like me. And so they did. They said they didn't want to do that, but they had no recourse. And so they did. And they dumped me out. And I hit the street and just did the same stuff over and over and over. Just did a different place. Moved after I got kicked out. I came back to North Carolina and bopped around for a little while and messing up Charlotte as long as they could stand me. Then I wound up going up to Michigan. You got to be pretty desperate to go to Michigan. And I lived for the next 3 or 4 years in Detroit and Flint and Saginaw and a lot of other wonderful places. There a lot of people live there. They think they're wonderful. I did too, but I was drunk. And so that's where I ground to a halt. Worked for Buick for a while till they saw that I wasn't making Buicks. Whatever they didn't name what I was making, but they got rid of me because they didn't want me making them. And so I got bopped out. And then for the next 2 or 3 years, whatever it was, I didn't get started back. I was always starting over. But my life became just an endless series of hitting the wall, dropping down, and then getting back up and trying again. And that's exactly what I did, over and over and over again. I'm not a criminal. I have never overtly committed a crime in my life. But when you're on the streets of a place like Detroit or Flint or Saginaw, it's a matter of either take or be taken. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And I wound up doing stuff that I would have never thought of doing. You know, I mean, you at rats, somebody might stick you a little bit, but not very deep. You know, it's different there. And so I started doing. I sold my blood, $5 a throw. That's what folks like me did. I would have let them, had they not had controls on, I would have let them pump me dry. I would have had no hesitation. And they didn't. And so the thing that started bringing it to an end for me was, and a good many people you know, alcoholics, the potential for great harm is always there. And we always know it. You know, when you come to conscience and think the first panicky thought is, what did I do? And that was mine all the time. And so one morning I woke up in a jail that I was quite used to in Flint. I was there a lot. And I was just like part of the furniture almost. And so I came to it, and it was nothing new. And I knew the routine. At 10 o'clock, the jailer would come by. I knew him well. And he'd come by and see if anybody wanted to try to make bond or get out or whatever. As I went over to the bars, and he looked at me, and I said, "Hey, when can I get out?" And he just looked at me. And normally he'd wolf around. You know how some guys will just sort of play a little bit. But he would normally just jack around a little bit. But he looked at me with total scorn. He said, "I hope never." And walked off. I had no earthly idea what he was talking about. But I knew he was serious. He wasn't playing. And I had no clue. I went back. He went on. I went back into the drum. And some guy I didn't know just grabbed me by the sleeve. And he said, "Man, you know what you in here for?" And I said, "No, do you?" And he said, "Well, don't know for sure, but last night a guy was arrested for driving drunk down the main street of the city, got in a collision, and 2 people were killed. And they have arrested you in connection with that." And I mean, it's shock. I mean, I knew I was capable of anything, but I wasn't capable of accepting anything. And when I was greeted with that kind of thing, you know, my mind just would not accept that possibility. And I just pushed it away and said, no, that couldn't be. And yet I knew that the likelihood was there. That's the first time I'd ever been in jail I didn't want out. You know, I didn't want anything. All I really wanted to do was disappear. if I had done something as horrendous as what it sounded like. 2 young people were killed in that collision. And if I was guilty of that, yeah, all I want to do is just be gone, just disappear. And so I sat in the jail. No, I didn't have anything to say to anybody, and I'll never know why. But one of the policemen there, didn't tell me anything about it, but called my folks in North Carolina, and my mother and sister were working in a mill up in Gaston County, and told them, said, "You got a guy up here in a lot of trouble. And if you want to do anything to try to help him, you better come on up because he's talking himself into more." Well, apparently I was in a condition and said, "Did you do that?" I said, "Yeah, I probably did." And so, my family, I'm a great believer in Al-Anon. I mean, a great believer. My wife's been in it well over 40 years, and I'm a great believer in it. I think it is a family illness. Quite frankly, I think the family of alcoholics are punished more than we are, because they have to deal with it so. Anyway, my family did what families of alcoholics do. They made a trip they couldn't afford to go up to Michigan to try to do something for a guy, and they didn't even know the situation totally. And but they knew they had a boy up there in some big trouble, and so they were going to do whatever it took. They couldn't afford to do that, but they did it anyway. Got an attorney they couldn't afford to try to do something to help me, and I didn't even want any help. I just wanted to disappear, frankly. And so they negotiated, and the attorney did what good attorneys do. They got. I was charged with involuntary manslaughter, and they got bond. They got bond, so that I was released to await trial. And I was running out. I'll be running out of time. You pretty quick. I'm gonna talk fast. Talk like I'm still in Michigan. But when I had never accepted anything. I'd had many people tell me I was alcoholic, but it never meant a thing to me. They might as well said I was a reindeer, and it would have meant just about as much. And but I knew. I mean, I was not somebody that could handle that kind of information, because when I even considered that I could have been guilty of that, I just wanted to disappear. Man, I just pushed it away and refused to believe it. And when I was released on bond, I knew I wouldn't drink. And it wasn't because of any resolution or any real desire to not drink. It was, how could you possibly drink after having done something like that? If I did, how could you do it? Well, the more logical question, I don't need to tell alcoholics here, the more logical question is, how would you not drink after something? But I didn't know that. And so I was released, didn't drink the first day, walked the streets all day, all night, and then the next day about noon I started to drink. And that was mid-May, I believe, is when that was in 1956. And I believe it's 56. And I started to drink, and from that day until the 19th of November, I drank literally like nobody I have ever seen. Now, I've worked with thousands of alcoholics, not a few. When I came in the program, we were still doing 12-step calls all the time. And so I understood what alcoholism was about. But I started drinking, and then it was just nonstop. And so I didn't try to stop. I mean, I was just gone. I know that I was trying to drink myself to death. I don't have any question about that. I guess I figured if the family just learned it, I'd OD'd with booze or something. It wouldn't be as heavy as saying, well, the guy committed suicide. And so I did that until the 19th of November. On that morning, I finished a bottle of gin. I had about 3 or 4 inches in a bottle of gin. And I finished that off, and then I was going to be tried that day at 9 o'clock. And so I finished that stuff up and then went on down to the court and listened to it. And I listened to the case as if I were on the jury, because I had no more recollection of it than any of them did. I had none. I listened to stuff. I listened to people testify about stuff that was totally unknown to me. and listened to the policeman who was investigating, and he was describing what was going on. First time I'd ever heard it, and he said he was investigating, taking care of the accident, and he saw this guy kind of staggering down the street, and he identified as me, and said that I walked up to him and said, "Was there an accident here?" And he said, "There sure was," and that I said, "I think I might have been in it," and going down and so that started the journey. I was never to come back, and so that's when I woke up in jail, and with that reality, I didn't want to accept as reality, but it was unavoidable, and then I was charged with that. On the 19th of November, I was tried on that charge of involuntary manslaughter, convicted, and I had absolutely no reservation because I had no quarrel that, whatever it was, and it was clear. When I listened to the testimony, I would have voted exactly like the jury did, no question about it. And when they called me up for sentencing, the judge sentenced me to a sentence of 5 to 15 years in Michigan, Southern Michigan Penitentiary. I'd never been there, but everybody on the street knew about it and knew that was the final resting place for a lot of us. And they said that, and when he passed that sentence, I guess it's a very human reaction. I had an instinctive reaction of fear, but at the same time, the most real sense of relief I think I'd ever known, because I knew it was over. It was over. Wouldn't be any more. And the next day, I was taken to that penitentiary down on the other side of the state, and then it was taken into the prison. There were 6 of us on a chain, just like cattle. We go going right through. And I remember walking through that gate, through the wall, and when I walked through, I had 2 thoughts. One was that I would never come out of there alive, and I didn't care. I really didn't. It wasn't anger or self-pity or anything like that. I just knew it was done, and I accepted it, that I would never come out of there. There were 6,300 and something guys locked up in that penitentiary. An awful lot of them were guys I hung out with in Detroit and Flint and around. And if they were guys like I hung out with, it couldn't be a very good place. And so I went in and it started out. I was absolutely convinced that I would never come out of there. And when I put in my cell, I spent my time, and what I intended to do for 15 years was to do whatever I could do to keep from thinking. And I did. I read everything known to man. I counted the cockroaches, counted the cracks in the wall, anything to take my mind away. And then if it had been up to me to ask for help, I would have never asked for help. Never. I couldn't have, because I felt so unworthy. I wouldn't have asked for help. And didn't know I needed any anyway. Now, I knew I was a character, but I knew that. But I didn't know there was anything that was an unmanageable kind of a deal. And so I was, when I was checking in, sound like I'm going in a hotel, but when I was going in, and they did the little intake deal like they do everywhere you go, and got through, the guy said, big old guy. I mean, he was big as a moose. And he said, "Man, you've had a lot of trouble with booze." And I said, "Yeah." I mean, my God, that's obvious. He had a record 3 inches thick of crimes that I had committed. Not a single one of them had a criminal act. They were all drunk, and you could fill out the blank. If you can do it drunk, I've done it drunk and been arrested for it. And I a lot of weird stuff. And he didn't, back then, AA had just started functioning. The medical world had just started to nod. I didn't know at the time, but had just started to nod toward alcoholism as being like an illness. And that was the point that this fellow was telling me. And he said, "We have an AA group here. I think you ought to go." I mean, it's just friendly advice. The building's on fire. Why don't you get outside? About that dramatic. And I didn't know what he was talking about, and I didn't ask any questions. All I wanted to do was be gone. I intended to spend my 15 years in cell number 37 on the 3rd tier of cell block 8. That's what I intended to do. And when I left, went back to my cell, a few days later, got a little piece of paper. It wasn't a letter, just a little piece of paper. Said you can go to your first AA meeting, 2nd of February, 57. I had no clue what any of that meant. You know, I didn't know what AA meant. I think some of the guys in the huddle told me what it was. Alcoholics Anonymous, I never heard of anything like that. And if I had never gone, it wouldn't have mattered. I mean, it wasn't an order. I learned when I got over there, went to the group, I learned that in order to go in the group, you had to have a chair open. And so there were 300 members in the group. And so if there wasn't a chair open, you had to wait. And that's why he sent me that little note. That next chair was mine. And I didn't know that. I wouldn't have argued over it, but I got it. And so I went in. And my first meeting of AA, I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I thought it was going to be some kind of a religious hoop-de-doo or something. I couldn't imagine what would you do in a meeting called Alcoholics Anonymous, secret drunks. That does not have a ring to it. I don't believe you could sell that. But anyway, I just went over there. Didn't have to, just did. They rung a bell and said, go if you want to. So I went over there and walked into that first meeting. And I truly, just like I said to start here, I've never felt more out of place anywhere in my life. Everybody in there was older than me by a margin. I was the youngest guy in the joint, 6,300 people, and I'm the youngest guy there. Obviously the youngest guy in that group. And I felt totally out of place. And these guys, I figured they were going to be some kind of a religious freak out. And so first thing they did was pray. First thing, just like we did tonight. And so if anybody was jumpy about that now, look out because they'll get you. I've been here ever since. They did that serenity prayer. And while they were praying, I'm thinking just what I thought. Man, they'll be out here with the guitars and drums any minute and going at it. And thank God they didn't. And now I wasn't identified with any of that or feeling good about it. It was an open speaker meeting. At that prison, I say we because I became a strong member of that group, but not that day, a little later on. But we had an open meeting one week and a closed discussion meeting next week. And we took over the entire school. Every classroom had a step discussion going on. And the speakers, we had to go get them. You know, just like some of us, they don't send for us, we just go anyway. And but back then, nobody just came anyway. And so if we wanted speakers, we had to get them. And the guy that we had got, I wasn't even there. But my first meeting, when they got through praying, it was a speaker meeting. And a guy from Detroit was introduced, and the introduction didn't mean anything. Called him Shy. You know, now Shy he wasn't. Shy came from CHI. He lived in Detroit, but he used to go to Chicago a lot and stick up places. And he so they nicknamed him Shy, you know, so maybe you stay away. And he did. And he got up there. He was nice looking if you didn't get close to it now, but if you got close, he was hammered up pretty bad. He'd been a professional boxer at one time. And it didn't look like a very good one because he was chopped up something fierce. And he told his story. Now, my God, I'd heard drunks tell every story known to man, and this guy told a story that just blew my mind. Why on earth would he had on a blue preaching suit? Well, why on earth would he come down to this penitentiary and talk to 300 hairy-legged convicts with that kind of stuff? It made no sense to me whatsoever. So I sat there just flabbergasted with the whole deal. And when it was over, I went out. It didn't feel any different. But I was back the next week. Nobody sent for me. Nobody would have been looking for me if I hadn't showed up or cared. They had other stuff to do. But I showed up. And somebody read the traditions a little earlier. That 11th tradition explains why I came back. We're talking about how we attract members in AA. We don't put out posters and billboards and you know you'll hear a little thing or sometimes saying it exists, but we don't promote. We don't do that. We attract. We either attract or repel. and we're capable of either. But I always like to be very mindful. Just like I said, I wanted to meet people here that I don't know. Because there may be somebody here that's fairly new in the program. I'm not new. So I don't think anybody's going to run me off. But if there's anybody here I don't know, I want to make sure that you know you're welcome. And that's exactly what helped me a lot. And when I got into that group, I didn't join anything. They didn't ask me to join. Just sat down. And that first meeting, when we read just a little bit of stuff here. They read enough stuff to fill a catalog. I mean, they read a lot of stuff. And I thought, gee, man, that's just like Sunday School 101. And when they finally got to quit, they didn't get through, they just quit. And introduced that guy. And I had never heard anything like that. And I went back, and the next week I was back. Nobody would have cared or even bothered to even notice that I hadn't come back. Couldn't have cared less. But I came back because it was that program of attraction, just like that 11th tradition said. That guy, he was ugly. I mean, just like any unsuccessful boxer, he was marked up pretty bad. And but he was, without a doubt, one of the few people I met that could walk in a room, and the minute he walked in, the room changed. He didn't have to do anything. He just walked in, and that contagious spirit of enthusiasm just livened things up. And that's exactly what happened to me. That's what brought me back to my second meeting. I didn't believe I was an alcoholic. I knew I'd been in a lot of trouble because of booze. I'd drunk as much as anybody knew, but I didn't know what an alcoholic was. But thank God for that speaker meeting and a guy that just told the truth about himself. I'm so thankful for that. He became my first sponsor. If anybody had told me I was going to do that, I'd have said, man, you drinking. He was too ugly. But he was a great guy, truly great guy. And so I got into it, to that group. It's called the Recovery Group. It'll always be my home group. I just don't want to be a regular member. You know, if I'm ever up in Michigan, I'll stop by just to make sure I'm not there and to see how they're doing. but those things, don't want to be a member. But that's where I did. And the thing I like about a group, right, what Chuck was talking about trying to get in and meeting people, stuff like that. Yeah, I was so grateful. That group, nobody ever asked me if I wanted to join a group. Nobody asked me if I wanted to be in. What they do is say, hey, Tom, how about helping us with these chairs? And that's a way of getting people involved, eh? I'm probably one of the best chair setter-uppers that I've ever met. Because, man, I have set up a ton of chairs. I still do it. I mean, it's just an old pattern of behavior. If you want to touch your chairs, though, you better beat me to it, because I'll put that sucker up if I can. And getting involved is so important. Not just learning the language and the lingo and all that stuff, but actually getting involved in the participation in AA. And whatever it is. It doesn't have to be making talks or anything like that. It's just a matter of getting in there, getting part of the team. And that's what happened to me. This thing, I won't go into detail because I don't have time, but it's a powerful program that we're sitting in here tonight, a powerful program. I don't care I do care what your situation is, but I don't care what your situation is in terms of the ability to cut through it with the principles of this program. I worked with a guy one time was in an iron lung. Most people are not old enough to even remember an iron lung. But it was a monstrosity of a machine that artificially breathed for people that couldn't breathe. It was an awful sounding thing. But I worked with an AA. A guy was an AA. He was locked up in that tube just like he was a pickle. And he could make signs and stuff like that. That was it. But my God, even there it was still working, eh? So it's a powerful thing. And that's what happened to me. I became a member of that group, a strong member. I became a very active member. I have never been, I'm in my 56th year now, and I have never been without a home group, because I believe it's the foundation of this whole deal. I mean, I can flit around the country, and I do. But I've got a home group where I'm responsible, where I'm going to go in, I'm going to take care of stuff, I'm going to step and carry my piece of the weight. And all that makes me part of the team. And so that's the thing. One of the things happening when my time wasn't up. But I'll just tell you this, and I'll wrap up on it. It's amazing how this thing works. I had a 15-year sentence. I didn't think I would ever walk out of there a day less than 15 years, if ever. And I really didn't think I would ever come out of there. But this thing worked for me, and I started really, really knowing this was my way of life. I became, believe it or not, doesn't matter to me, I became a free man in a maximum custody penitentiary. Free for the first time in my entire life. Now, I was confined, but my heart wasn't confined. My spirit wasn't confined. My ability to be useful and have purpose was not confined. And I developed a new way of life. I became a citizen of a place for the first time in my life. I made it better, didn't make it worse. And so the transformation occurred. I knew that I was going to be staying in Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew this was my lifeline. And shortly, about a year before I was eligible to be released, I didn't get a call. I didn't have anything to call on, but somebody said something to the loudspeaker or whatever, told me to go somewhere to the head shed. And normally when you go to the head shed, it's not for a whoopee party. It's normally bad news. And so I went over there a little gingerly and tried to sneak in. And the man met me at the door was the chairman of the State Parole Commission. And I thought, oh boy, they've got to lay something on me now. As I went over there and he introduced himself just like I was a gentleman. And said, come right in, and had the whole parole commission sitting in there. And we walked in, and on the way in, he said, you probably wonder why you're here. And I don't mean to prison, but you wonder why you're here with me like this. I said, well, yes, sir, I do wonder, why am I here? And God was nowhere close to eligibility for release. He said, well, what it is, once every 10,000 cases, we pick somebody who seems to be a remarkable example of restoration or rehabilitation, or whatever the term, of real noticeable change. And he said, we've decided we want to talk with you. And I said, well, that's quite an honor, and I truly appreciate it. And I did. I mean, my God, there's almost 6,500 guys in there. And they picked me out as the guy you want to talk to. And so I was absolutely overwhelmed with that. And went in, and the whole parole commission there, and he's on the way in, he said, now I'll tell you, we're not going to release you at this point. But if you keep doing like you're doing, the day that you're eligible, you'll walk. And I said, that's a square deal. And so we went in, and that's exactly what happened. I got contact with a group over in Gastonia where I was going to live, and that became my home group. When I got out, I got immediately active. I'm talking about day one. I got immediately active, and I mean up to my ears. And I haven't quit so far. Yeah, I've been active for the whole time that I've been here. Not only have I been active, but I am without question the most rewarded man that I know. The most rewarded man that I know. None of it deserving, but it's just, I don't know why, but I've been blessed beyond imagination. And I don't have time to talk about it, but if you ever want to hear a little something about that, grab me over a Starbucks, you pay. But I'll talk you to death of that, but I'll be glad to tell you about that. Wish you had more time, but I don't. Thanks a lot.